Thorne will be discussing various approaches to creativity that have helped with his creative journey, but not only as a musician, but also as a system designer and entrepreneur. There are many simple hacks we can use to support continued learning and growth, and we'll be unpacking a few of them to see how they can create positive changes in your life. So once again, everybody here, the inaugural World Music Forum, Continue Creativity, How to Make More with Less. Once again, a multidisciplinary creative musician, producer, and artist in at Torah, co-founder at Unit, co-founder, New Wine Records, and founder at Lulik. Give it up one time for Thorne. Give it up, y'all. Give it up, y'all.
Yeah. Hey guys,
yes.
thank you. Sorry, mic was muted. Everything's looking good now. Sounding good. Thumbs up if you can hear me.
Yes, can hear you.
Beautiful, man. Fabulous. Well, thanks for having me, man. Thanks for hosting. Love the setup you have going on as well. This is tight.
Oh, thank you.
Hell yeah. So today, basically, I thought one thing I've been pretty passionate about over my career as a musician, and something that I've also been on like a continuous learning journey with is the discussion of creativity, how to nurture it, how to keep it going, how to find it when you don't have it, and essentially what it can kind of do to the process of creation, if you can actually use or understand different ways of getting something done. So a little bit of background with me. I have been playing music since I was probably about 13. My dad gave me 2 pairs of drumsticks, and he told me that if I can learn to play the rock beat, which is, you know, the most standard beat, it's just a if I can learn to play that on my thighs, he's going to get me a drum kit. I thought that was a pretty good proposition. So I jumped on, I learned the beat, and I got my drum kit. And at that time, I was pretty into sort of like the heavier kind of style of music. I guess like Tool, Rage Against the Machine, lots of other bands like this. And so that kind of was in charge of my sort of creative journey at that stage. But I didn't really dive that deep into drums until I probably was about 16 or 17, when I moved from New Zealand to Australia, and then started to focus and started a few little projects with a few friends, a few bands. And I guess things got really serious when I was about 21, and I started another band with some old schoolmates as well. And yeah, this is the band called Torah. This is the band that I'm still in now. And we've been a band now for like nearly 10 years, which is crazy. If I actually have to reflect on everything we've done and everything we've been through. But here we are. We're professional musicians. We live with what we do. It's a lifestyle with lots of ups and downs. But I think some of the things that I want to touch on today are some of the more sort of it's like I guess we're not going to get too deep into the semantics, but it's definitely more to do with relationships and creativity as well, because I find that being in a band, sometimes it's actually not really that much about making music. It's actually a lot more about maintaining relationships and understandings with the people that you're actually working with, because you're in this situation where you basically have to take feedback from 4 different people to get one vision to align. And this might seem like it's all really, really cool, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of tension. There's a lot of ego that comes into play as well. And so kind of managing that and having a certain sensitivity towards that is pretty important. So I guess my journey with understanding different aspects or avenues of creativity really kicked off when I read a book called The Artist's Way. I believe this is by a lady called Julia Cameron. And basically she touches on this thing called the morning pages, where essentially after waking up, one of the first things that you're actually doing, I mean, she's an author, by the way, but I find that you can actually apply this to almost anything that you do that's creative. One of the first things you do when you wake up is you sit down at your desk, you open your book, and you basically have set a predefined amount of time that you need to sit down and just write. And what begins to happen is on the first day, you know, you're finding some stuff to talk about, and you're writing and you're kind of going. But after a few days, you get to a point where you sort of start to hit these brick walls when you're not too sure what you actually want to be writing about. And you then have to start to explore different ways of expressing certain things, talking about your day, talking about other days, you know, expressing dreams that you've had or thoughts or whatever it is. And it becomes a pretty interesting process of self-discovery, because you actually are forced, or at least you force yourself into a situation where you have to kind of dig a little bit deeper. And so I started to do this pretty religiously about 2 years ago. I do like writing anyway, so it felt quite natural for me. But one thing I realized pretty much about when COVID kicked in, we had just moved from Australia to Amsterdam, which is where I am now at the moment still. And I guess with all of the extra free time that we had, I started to do a lot more writing of music at home. And I basically started to apply the same model of morning pages, except for me, it was kind of like the evening sessions, because I'm a bit of a night owl. And so I would sit there, and whether I felt like making music that day or not, I basically just forced myself to put my ass on the chair and actually just start creating. And a really, really interesting thing actually started to happen, wherein I realized that so much of the intention to write and so much of the process actually is defined by simply starting. So I'm guessing everyone has probably heard a lot of people discussing like this concept of being in the flow state, or being in flow, and how to get to that state, and things that a person can kind of do to encourage that state to arrive more often. And what I realized is it's so much more simple than people maybe make it out to be. And I think all you actually have to do is you just have to start. And this is with any creative discipline, I believe, at this stage. By sitting down and starting, as soon as the ball is actually rolling, we get the snowball effect, wherein it becomes easier to actually continue to create whatever it is you've started. And you also become invested in what you're doing. And you almost forget that you had any sort of desire not to actually create before. So even if you're not feeling like doing it, simply just forcing yourself to get into the situation where you start can be enormously useful. And I will have to actually say, quite honestly, that some of like the favorite tracks that I've made were actually created with this process. There was no intention. I didn't have like a chord progression or a specific set of lyrics in mind. I basically just sat down and just started playing around. And when you're in the state of play, I think the sort of the editor, because I think in a creative mind, you've got the creator and you've got the editor. You know, you unleash, you put everything on the page or into the computer, whichever medium you're using. And then once it's all kind of there, you go through a process of deduction and removal and refinement, where you're actually basically whittling all of the stuff back down to its essence. You're basically cutting away the fat. And so when you're in a situation where there's no like prior expectation of a specific outcome, you're very free. And I think the mind goes into this sort of childhood sort of state of play, where you don't have these inhibitions, you don't have these preconceived ideas of what you're actually trying to achieve, and you just jump into it and you get a very honest output. It's not always good, but I would say that like there is a lot of really good stuff that does come out of that. And speaking to that, some of my favorite stuff has come out of that as well. And now the second thing that I also found really, really useful when I am in a sort of creative slump, even if I'm sitting down and I'm forcing myself to write something, if I'm not really inspired, or if I just seem to be going around in the same circles, a very, very useful tool is actually to get onto YouTube or get onto somewhere and actually start watching some tutorials. So if you can find a producer or a DJ or a songwriter that you like, and you go and you start watching some of their videos or some of their interviews even, and kind of hearing how they work, it can also spark some inspiration. So recently this happened with a producer that I like called Daud, who's based in Berlin, makes like some seriously awesome tunes. And I found this masterclass that he was basically doing. I forget exactly what platform or website it was actually from. But I watched the masterclass and I got so inspired, because he was using the same tools, but he was using them in such a novel, different way. And so I kind of replicated what he was doing, and the output was just so cool as well. And so this is another thing that I find that really just kind of inspires the process again, and also just really aids in expanding your skill set as well, and just seeing things from different angles and everything like this. So I find that really, really incredible. But the next thing, I guess more specific to bands, because I have only been in bands my whole life. I haven't really made it as like an independent producer yet. So I think as far as things go, there's a certain amount of relationship management and kind of ego checking that has to come into play as well. Because when you're in a band, like my band has got 4 people, a lot of time we do align on certain things, but if we're actually in the studio and we're trying to write, depending on how invested any one of us might actually be in a track, and what we sort of imagine the outcome to be, it can become very tumultuous trying to navigate everyone else's opinions about what is actually going on. And so there's a certain amount of emotional maturity that's come into it. And quite honestly, if I do have to zoom out and look at my time with the band over the last sort of 10 years, music has been a very big part of what we do. We obviously are musicians, but I think the interpersonal relationships and the understandings that we've had to forge with one another, spoken and unspoken, has probably been the biggest thing. And I kind of believe that that's going to be the case for the rest of time. And this is probably why we hear these stories of bands like, you know, Jane's Addiction and many, many, many others who basically just have these extremely tense interpersonal relationships, but when they get on stage, it's just fire, everything pops, and it's just absolutely awesome. And this is also, unfortunately, probably why we hear a lot of these bands actually break up, because from the outside, everything can look like roses, but once you're actually in there, it can become extremely difficult to separate yourself from what you're actually doing. And I think when egos start to clash, it's just too easy to step away and to go do something else than it is to actually come in and actually try and remedy what's going on. So we were all friends before we were actually in a band. We went to school together. So I think we've set a foundation that is, we try not to take things too personally. We try not to like throw digs at one another that is too personal. But essentially there is a lot of management, there's a lot of caring, and there's a lot of just open communication that actually needs to take place. And where I guess I was kind of going with this is, in a band setting, if this stuff isn't actually dealt with and managed, it can dramatically hinder the creative process itself. Because if everyone's not aligned when you actually get into a studio, or when you're trying to write an album or a song or whatever it is, it's going to be an extremely uncomfortable experience. It's probably going to maybe even be more than uncomfortable. It can be like a really bad experience as well. And it can just make you hate what you're actually doing. And so there's a point where any musician or producer or songwriter gets to a point where they're probably stepping out of an amateur role into a professional role. And when money starts to get involved, and you've got money, you've got ego, and you've got friends, and you've got music, and it becomes this big melting pot, things can get pretty volatile. So it's good to have some sort of recourse for how to manage these things early on, but just to be extremely open and honest with one another as you're actually progressing through your careers. Because I mean, music can really change people's lives. And I think there is a certain onus and a certain respect that needs to be given to musicians who just have stood the test of time, you know, like the Radiohead, for example, who still continue now to put out great music and have done so for most of their careers. And I think it says a lot about who they are as people, even more so than what they might be like as musicians, you know, because to really stick that out is actually quite a feat that I don't think a lot of people fully appreciate. You know, they just see the outcome, the album, the song, whatever it is, and they enjoy it or they don't. But nevertheless, there's so much backstory that has existed behind that kind of has led to this becoming a thing. So for me, this is definitely one of the big things. We're still working on this now, but I would say that we're better now than we have ever been. I think we have very, very open communication, and we all love and respect one another. And so it's just basically a process of continually managing that. And yeah, so just continuing to kind of like do what we love. And I think if you're really committed to the process of continuing to make music with friends or with other people that you've met and you've started a band, this to me is really important. It's to have a sort of understanding about different ways to approach creativity, how that in effect actually balances with managing relationships, and then kind of just fusing the two together to make something very, very special. Because if you can arrive at this state of play when you're actually in a session with your bandmates and everything is just flowing, it is an enormously enjoyable experience. And you contrast that to what it can be like if you're not, and it can be an absolutely terrible experience. So it just comes down to, yeah, I think just a certain amount of emotional intelligence and maturity, and just continually maintaining this, because it's something that does have to be done continuously. You know, you're not going to do like one course on creativity or managing relationships and then that's you done forever. It's a constant process, because as humans we continually are evolving and developing. And so I think with that, everyone's needs and requirements are going to be changing. But yeah, for the most part, I just thought that that was something really important to discuss today, because I don't actually hear it discussed enough. And I think that most people who actually listen to music probably aren't aware of all of the stuff that goes on. But yeah, just important for musicians, producers, and everyone. I think if you're having creative problems, definitely just sit down and just try and really get started. And if that's not working, if you find yourself going in a loop, just making the same stuff you're trying to get away from, 100% check out some of your inspirations, some of the bands or producers that you like, watch a masterclass, tutorials, and just kind of like refuel the fire a little bit. And yeah, you'll find yourself exploring a whole lot of new terrains. So I think we've only got about 8 minutes left. If anyone's got some questions or anything else, please fire away. I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Yes, the floor is open. Everyone, we have a question from Anthony Bashi. What are some practices you have found useful when creative direction differs across a band / group?
Okay, this is a very good question. Okay, if I have to be completely honest, I don't think I have found a best practice, because this is an extremely sensitive terrain that normally has to be dealt with pending the situation. So for example, oh man, sorry, just like the loudest stage there. So for example, if I've written a song and I've had a really deep involvement with the song, and then it comes to actually making a video clip, naturally I will be able to sort of take the reins a little bit more on what I see the outcome of that video clip being. So I guess there's a sort of a democratic process that comes into play. But then again, it also depends on the situation, because if we've managed to find a really, really awesome creative director, we're just going to give him or her the reins to just take it away and to let them kind of extrapolate the concept that they see fit. But yeah, again, it just really does come back to this process of having very clear and open communication. And if you're unsure about something, or if you're feeling uneasy about something, you've just got to express that. You just cannot leave things bottled up, because then you're going to be sitting in the tour van for the next, week or two or whatever it is, and things are going to be festering. And then you start to like make little stabs or whatever it is. So yeah, I think on a case-by-case basis, it needs to sort of be reviewed. But one would hope in an ideal scenario that everyone sort of has the sensitivity to feel out what's going on. If I'm really, really invested, if I've got a very clear vision for a certain song, I can take the reins and I can sort of run with that. And that seems to have been how at least we've worked the last long while. Yeah, we just kind of allow things to flow and just take them bit by bit. But yeah, thank you. That was actually a very fair question.
What is your take, Thorne, like on collaboration? Let's say working with, let's say I know you have a band. Do you also, seek to collaborate with other artists as well too? And
yeah,
if so,
yeah.
What has your experience been like? And have you learned from other artists that have kind of been, outside of your band as well too? What did you learn?
Absolutely. That's actually a really, really good question as well. So collaboration for me is very touchy. Sometimes you're going to get into a session with a producer or a singer, and it's just not going to work. It really just doesn't work. You're not gelling. You're on 2 different pages. And I think you both need to accept that it's just not the time, at least, or it's just not working at this point in time. And that has happened to us a few times, because we used to try to work with different producers and musicians more, but we just found that there was a clash of opinion too often, and it was kind of beginning to tarnish at least our creative process. But the singer Joe, he has definitely been in more sessions as well, doing feature tracks for different artists and producers. And I've heard similar feedback from him, like sometimes he gets in there and it's just awesome, and like they just vibe it out, and next thing there's just a banger track. And then other times it's just a struggle and he just hates the idea of collaborating with different musicians. So it really just does depend on the person and the relationship that you have with that person. So something I like to do to kind of set the scene before I even kick off, if I have got a singer or a different producer in the room, is basically to just share some music that we like, you know, and spend an hour just sitting down, chatting, catching up, getting to know one another, and just sort of, yeah, setting that scene, sharing some music, artists, even art, other things. And then I guess in the process of doing that, we kind of align on some sort of vision, and we can hopefully look towards getting a better outcome. But yeah, going in like with no sort of preparation with someone who's on a different page is very uncomfortable, and yeah, not my kind of vibe. But I know that there are singers and songwriters out there that just push through that and they make amazing tracks. But yeah, I am definitely more of like an intuitive creator. If I'm just not feeling it, whatever that means, then I can't do it.
Yeah. Word. So let me ask you this. So in terms of the music token, now you talk about your band, you talk about, you know, the creative process, and even, you know, touch a little bit on collaboration. How do you see, like, you know, I guess you talked about building that synergy. How do you see like the music token, you know, helping, I guess, does it help, like, in your mind, like, let's say through the music token, through the using the music token, does it help the process in any way, or what are some of the benefits you see in terms of, you know, helping in terms of your process?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of see the music token being a force that allows us to kind of galvanize our community. So we've got fans, and I think with a music token, we're given an opportunity to allow them to kind of share in our success. As well as the music token, we would be making a Torah token as well. And we'll probably be using the token as kind of like a value storage derivative that we would be holding in our token treasury. And I think both tokens really serve a purpose in that it allows us to kind of create our own microeconomy, you know, and we've been talking about this internally as well. We have a record label at this point in time, and everything's going swimmingly. We're really happy with their work, and everything's great. But we're thinking after this album coming up, maybe for the 5th or the 6th album that we're doing, we're going to try and do a album that's basically funded completely by our fans, and from other investors who are keen. And then we actually have an opportunity to kind of siphon profits back to all of those people who actually got involved with the project as well. So we can create this organic network effect wherein we now have our fans and investors who are financially invested in what we've created. So they kind of like own a little piece of what we've got. And I think it could be a really, really cool experiment, a community building experiment rather, to just kind of see how it works, because tokens, it's a relatively new concept. Cryptocurrency itself is still in its infancy, I believe. So there is going to be a certain amount of education and onboarding that needs to be done. But I think if we start sowing the seeds now, we can actually start to kind of get our wider community warmed up to the idea of what's happening here. Because I think once you understand it, it's not a very difficult concept to get your head around. It's just novel, you know, and I think we're creatures of habit. We don't really like to change things too much, too quickly. So I think they will need to be some sort of transition period that they kind of need to be chaperoned through. We kind of have to like hold their hands and kind of guide them. But I feel like this is happening, you know, like my mom the other day, who's just so technologically illiterate. She's like, "Hey, Thorny, have you heard about this Bitcoin thing?" And like my mom's pretty out of the loop, and I'm just like, whoa, okay. So like, you know, things are happening. Things are definitely happening. And I think it's just a matter of time, you know, we're kind of in this exponential adoption curve now. And I think we're all pretty well placed to sort of ride this wave. And I just love the idea of having a sort of more decentralized egalitarian model with which we can actually have, with which we can actually use to raise the money that we need to make our albums. Because I mean, we are pretty streamlined. We don't require a lot of cash, but with extra cash, we can make things a little bit extra fantastic, you know? And I would love to bring the fans in on that as well. So yeah, we're busy trying to sort of map that all out and how that's going to work and how we want to go about onboarding people, because we do really want to do it right. I think the few early projects, if they want to have that success, they really need to put in the time. Oh, sorry. They really need to put in the time to educate their community, because yeah, we don't want this to be like a Ponzi scheme or some kind of pump and dump or some sort of hype driven thing. It really needs to have a very strong underpinning of longevity and how it's actually created. So yeah, that's where I'm at this point in time.
Okay. All right. So how do we find your band? Like how do we find you? Is this social media or website?
Yeah, all of the above. Basically website toramusic.com.au. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, all streaming platforms, YouTube as well. We're also just about to head on a European tour. So we've got our first show tomorrow, actually, in Rotterdam, and then we play Amsterdam, and then we got Germany, all over the place. So yeah, we're going to be on the road for sort of the next month. But yeah, get
Amazing.
us on website, or you can find us on the website toramusic.com.au.
Yes.
Well, basically,
And also on
social
Instagram, I'm
anywhere.
following you now. Tora Music, TORAMUSIC.
Hell yeah. And stay
Right.
posted. I just saw a quick comment. Where are we playing in Germany? We are
Yes.
playing Berlin. We are playing Cologne. We are playing Hamburg. And I think we're playing Munich as well. I have to check. I'm the drummer, by the way, so I'm the guy that's like never on top of all of the shows. I just like get the advance and just make sure I'm there like on time, on the day, ready to perform. But yeah,
Gotcha.
anyone that's keen to come, reach out to me or to the band, and yeah, we can get you some links and everything sorted.
All right, word. Thank you so much, Thorne. Give it up, y'all.
Thanks a lot, guys. All the best.